I am experimenting really in the Old Testament, and I'd like you to turn to Judges chapter 6. And as I said, in this last series of Old Testament presentations, that the Old Testament is descriptive because the chronicler is giving us the history of the Jewish people. The New Testament is definitive because it operates with understanding certain words that were used in Greek that were not used very much in Greek language. When you understand the word agape, Paul uses agape, but it was never used very much in the Greek language. The whole issue of conditional love was not presented until Paul took it to another level. So the definition, again, is Greek, but the description is Hebrew, because the chronicler or the historian is writing and describing the history of Israel. You have to be very careful that you don't get involved in spiritualizing too much, because oftentimes we can take a story and make it mean exactly what we want. And particularly those of us who are Pentecostal, we operate in subjective theology. And we just simply said, the Lord told us. Yes. But the Bible is not a book that is subjective in its interpretation. Even though you have to have some anointing, but the Bible is very, very hermeneutical in its approach. And that is that it's very scientific in its approach, and you have to approach it very carefully. I want you to read with me, or just I'll read it, Judges 6:22. And when Gideon perceived that he was an angel of the Lord, Gideon said, "Alas, O Lord God, for because I have seen an angel of the Lord face to face." And the Lord said unto him, "Peace be unto you, fear not, thou shalt not die." Then Gideon built an altar there unto the Lord and called it Jehovah Shalom. Unto this day it is yet in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Look at somebody with everything you got and just tell them, Jehovah Shalom. The Lord is my peace. I want to actually begin in an unorthodox way, because immediately I think of 1 Corinthians chapter 14. And when I think of 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and about verse 33, that just hit me, where Paul is saying, "For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints." The unorthodox approach is that Paul makes a contrast between peace and confusion. And internal peace is not influenced by external circumstances. External circumstances will operate on the outside, but a spirit of peace will endeavor to establish an environment of peace. In other words, if you're operating within the parameters of confusion, then oftentimes it's because you don't have enough power to establish the environment of peace. When you operate from a spiritual level, then you understand that what happens in your life happens from the inside. Can I just take a little time with that? You see, when God created man and he breathed into him the breath of life, and what God did was God operated on his inside. When the man fell, or when he sinned, and the Lord said, in the day that thou sinnest, thou shalt surely die, then what happened was that man became outside influenced. In other words, once he sinned and his spirit died, then God could not connect to his spirit in order to talk to his mind. Then everything that is significant now becomes outside. When it becomes outside, we feel comfortable because of the clothes we wear, the shoes we have on, the cars we drive, and the houses we live in. And we judge each other based on what we possess. But the operation of God was never for your outside to make you feel good about yourself. It was always for the inside. It's an interesting dynamic because many times we feel less than we should because we don't have what somebody else has. But it's never been about possession, really. It's all about the Spirit of God that operates within the parameters of a man's heart and the power of God from the inside. You don't win from the outside. You know, every now and then when you're feeling down and out, you go shopping. And you let shopping give you a sense of peace. Every now and then when you are sad, you go to eating. And a lot of us have gained a lot of pounds because psychologically we've been displaced. When the end of the day is food isn't going to make you feel any better, and shopping isn't going to make you feel any better because you're going to end up with so much debt that in itself is going to upset you. We don't win from the outside. We win from the inside. And it doesn't matter what somebody else has. There's a sense of security that you have. Let me put another way. Most of you sisters won't just leave the house looking any kind of way. Now, why do you have to spend an hour on makeup just to go down to the store? Because you don't want anybody to see you in that natural beauty, so you have to augment it and supplement it and complement it in order to go down the street. But if you're secure with who you are, it doesn't matter how you go out the door, because I know who I am on the inside. There's a purpose then in peace, and there is focus in peace. Paul puts peace in contradiction to confusion. And when there's a lot of confusion, and you got to check to see who you're hanging with, because whenever you are moving around in confusion, most of the time it's because you've got somebody in your space who has no peace within themselves. And when they don't have peace within themselves, you have to overcome their confusion with peace. Because God is not an author of confusion, He's an author of peace. So if there's confusion around you, then God is not there, because He's not in the middle of a lot of mess and a lot of junk and a lot of foolishness. He is in the middle of a calm and a place of peace. Oh, I feel it here. This follows a controversy then of the gifts. And here is when Paul presents it. And I'm going unorthodox here. But Paul is dealing with the gifts. And what he's saying is that people who are talking above each other and interrupting each other, they are outside of the service of God. Because anytime you have got to argue with somebody in order to make your point, and you've got to out-talk somebody, and you've got to bring somebody down. See, one of the things about confusion is that you don't have to reduce your neighbor to be important. If you are who you are, then you don't have to put anybody else down in order for you to feel good about yourself. I feel it here. In verse 31, he says the two prophets shouldn't speak at the same time. In fact, at the meeting, number per meeting limited to no more than 2 or 3. He says when the Spirit of the Lord moves, everybody's not going to be talking. Can I take it further? You see, a lot of folks say the Lord said, but they couldn't hear the Lord because they don't know the Lord if they heard him. Because oftentimes we take our own egocentrical disposition and our egomaniacal attitude and we put it on the Lord. How many times have somebody said to you, the Lord told me to tell you? But what he says to us now is that the spirit of the prophet is subject to the prophet, which means that God does not bombard and overcome my will or my attitude. And that is simply saying that I don't have to speak out because the Lord has moved in me. Because what he's done is he's subjugated the spirit to my disposition and my attitude. I don't have to hurt your feelings because I don't like you and want to say the Lord is rebuking you. And how many times have you been in church and been rebuked by somebody and they put it on the Lord? The Lord is not a God of war, he's a God of peace. And when he moves in the power of the Holy Ghost, you have peace with you. And when you have peace, you don't need a special environment. Can I take it further? They had 2 artists to draw peace, and one artist drew a picture of everything in its pristine quality, everything in its perfection. And when he drew it, he had a little bird standing on the side of the branch where the sun was shining, the wind wasn't blowing, and everything was in place, and they said peace. The other artist drew the storm and the lightning, indicating that it was raining awfully terrible in the middle of a hurricane, and he put a little bird on the limb and he called that peace. You see, peace is not predicated on what's on the outside. Peace is predicated on what's on the inside. And when other people are interrupting each other and being rude to each other, when you have peace, you don't have to lose yourself in the battle with other folk. Because when God gives you peace, it is the peace that the Lord giveth, not what the world giveth. Because if the world gives it, it can take it away. But when you're peaceful, you have an attitude that says, in spite of what's going on around me, I will have peace. And no matter how crazy folk are around you, you can give God praise and give him glory, because I'm not influenced by what you do. I'm influenced by what I have, and I have the peace of God which passeth all understanding. I feel something here. The word spirit, then, Hodge says, and I quote, he said the word spirit is used for the divine influence under which the prophet spoke. That influence was not of such a nature as to destroy the self-control of those who were its subjects, unquote. The prophets of God were calm and self-possessed. No need to interrupt, since the one speaking could not stop when he wanted. Could stop when he wanted. So no need to interrupt. And the one who received a revelation could wait as long as he pleased. He didn't have to blurt it out. He didn't have to hurt somebody's feelings. There can be no edification. There can be no growth. There can be no accomplishment of purpose in confusion. Because when you don't know how to outline the circumstance, and when you don't know how to put things in order, then you take things out of order, and God is a God of order. Anytime you deal with God, you're going to deal with order, because he doesn't put the last first. He does not put the middle in the front. What God does is he outlines things so that you can understand where he is. He does not change in his position. So you can understand that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Have you ever dealt with people who you didn't know where they were on a given day? I told somebody, they said, well, my friends are bipolar. I said, well, my friends are biplanet. Some folks are so far from where they ought to be on a day-to-day basis that you're scared to approach them because you don't know what attitude they're going to have today. The wonderful thing about reaching out to God is that he is going to be the same every time you pray. He's not going to be somewhere where you can't find him or don't understand him. And that's the consistency that he gives to the child of God. A child of God is consistent because they don't move with the vicissitudinous changes of life. They don't bounce up and down. They're not over there yesterday and over here today. Their attitude is consistent because they have a God who keeps them in order. And when you learn how to praise him because of his consistency, then it becomes consistent in your own spirit. I don't have to worry about you being over there yesterday and over here today and loving me today but talking about me tomorrow, because whenever you serve God, he gives a consistency and he gives a temperance in the child of God. So now he becomes the God of order. Then he becomes the author of purpose. And now he has to be the God of victory, because there is no catastasis, there is no negative downstanding, there is no instability in God. That's why you're still here and you're still making it in spite of the changes of your environment, because the changes of your environment doesn't change the strength of who you are. And that's why I look to the inside to overcome circumstances on the outside. And when people leave you for dead, you can assure them that victory shall be mine. God, when I understand this, God is not at the center, or he's not the originator of instability. He's not the originator of disturbance. Peace is the order of his spirit. Can I talk a little bit about that? When you understand peace, then you understand power, because you cannot have peace if you don't have power. And when God is a God of power, because he can make anything peaceful in his environment. He's riding on the boat with the disciples, and the disciples are in the middle of the storm, and yet Jesus is asleep. I've got news for you. Jesus knows when your next storm is coming, and he is relaxed while he knows it's on the way. And yet still the disciples woke him up and said, carest thou not that we perish? And that's the attitude of confusion. You've got Jesus on board, and I want to talk to somebody in here who's going through a lot of disturbing times. You've got Jesus on board, and if you've got Jesus on board, there is no storm that can override the peace of having Jesus on board. You see, part of our disturbance is we don't have the faith to believe that when Jesus is on board, there is no storm that can overturn your situation. I want to talk to somebody here. You spend many times, we spend dealing with people on the outside, but not dealing with the Lord on the inside. And sometimes people on the outside will make you want to grab for their neck, but when you have Jesus on the inside, you don't need to be violent, because he will take care of whatever's going on in your life. I feel like shouting. That's why he told me, I don't need you to be animosity to anybody. Your animosity is not necessary, because animosity brings confusion. Have you ever been around somebody you loved, and you loved them, but it was two ways? You loved them, but you didn't like them. I wish I could preach to somebody here. And oftentimes you're caught between two different feelings, because the same person that gave you pleasure is probably the same person that hurt you the most. So you're caught between loving and disliking. My ex-wife said to me many times, I love you, but I don't like you. Now, to love me and not like me has got to be confusing. But whenever you have power to change the persons around you, then you can have peace, because I'm not influenced by what you do. Can I take it a little further? When I can love my enemies, it's because my love is not connected to my enemy, which means you can't influence me to hate you because you don't like me, because I'm not connected to how you feel about me. I'm connected to how God feels about me. Have I told you, touch your neighbor yet? It's on the way. Peace then is the order of his spirit, and that's why when you come to Babel, you understand that Babel, the Tower of Babel, is confusion. And man, in a titanic social revolt, attempted to throw off the rule of God and achieve unity and peace without God. Give somebody a high five real quick for the first time and say, neighbor, you can't have real peace without God, because when you have God in your spirit, he takes you away from the confusion of others. And while others are going crazy, you can sit in the house and be cool, because what I have is not the vicissitudinous changes of the people around me. I have the consistency of God in my spirit. That's why I don't get crazy in a car and have to ride somebody down and show them fingers, because I have peace. I don't have to curse somebody out. I want to talk to somebody. I ain't got to curse you out, because I know that the God I serve is going to take care of my business, and he's going to watch over me. And that's why he said, vengeance is mine, I will repay. So I don't need you sitting around conspiring to hurt somebody else. What I need you to do is sit down and give me praise, and let me feel the joy of your peace that I have given to you. I'm almost there, Pat. I feel something coming on. It's the symbol then of unity, and their unity was the tower, and the strength of their unity was their common language. So what God did was he judged them by confusing their language, so they couldn't operate any longer in the unity of the move against God. Anytime you move to rule God out of your life, you're going to end up with confusion. Anytime God doesn't pick your mate, or God does not pick your business partner, you're going to end up with confusion. Anytime God doesn't pick the people who are around you, you're going to end up with confusion. And all I have to say to you is, check what follows you, and what follows you will prove who's with you. And if it's a lot of junk following you, then you're hanging out with the wrong people, because whenever God chooses who's with you, then the peace of God will follow you with goodness goodness and mercy shall follow you all the days of your life. Because you're with the right people, pull on your neighbor and say, neighbor, I don't need any more confusion. When he speaks of his own language here, there is no accomplishment in confusion, because you can't get to the next level if you're confused. The only thing that gets you to the next level is walking in principle. There is no relationship that's strong in confusion, because if we're confused, we can't have a good relationship. God uses confusion to defeat evil. I wish I could talk to you about that. He uses confusion to stop people who would come together for evil. And most times folk who conspire for evil, God interrupts it with confusion until he allows them to turn on themselves. I wish I could preach it to you. You don't have to worry about your enemies diffusing or confusing you, because God will let them confuse themselves. Can I preach like I feel it? Do you remember when the 4 lepers said, if we go into the city, we die. If we stay out here, we die. So let us go into the enemy's camp. 4 of them put their feet up and marched into the enemy's camp. But the enemy thought that it was a great army. It was only 4. But the enemy thought that it was a big army coming, and they ran off and left all of their goods. I got news for you. When you're not in the middle of confusion, but you're operating in the principle of God and moving by the faith of God, God will confuse your enemies. He'll make 4 of us seem like an army of us, so that the enemy will understand that when God is operating in your favor, they cannot overcome the few. When 2 or 3 are gathered in his name and he is in the midst, then the enemy will be confused. I feel like preaching now. Give somebody a high five and say, neighbor, my enemies will be confused, because no weapon formed against me shall prosper, because you won't know how to use the weapon. I feel like preaching now, that they may not understand one another's speech. Y'all sit down. Hebrews saw confusion in various ways, and Topper said it's an empty space. It's void, nothing. It's confusion, chaos. For the world, the earth was without form and void. Then there's reverse conventional relationship chaos. And then there's sexual confusion, like bestiality and incest. Then the word was used for shame, confused thinking of self. Then there's Calum, wounding of spirit through public humiliation, and the wounding of the spirit because of defeat and captivity. Then there was Harper, loss of self-possession through humiliation and embarrassment and confusion. And then there was Busha, to fall into disgrace, failure either of self or of an object of trust, to be humiliated or to be shattered or dismayed. And it means to be dried up. The Greek says to be double-minded is unstable in all of his ways, because anytime you can't put your mind together, you can't engage your will. And if you can't engage wage your will, you can't receive anything from the Lord. So a man with peace can declare, I will bless the Lord at all times. His grace shall continually be in my mouth. Oh, magnify the Lord with me. I feel the Holy Ghost in here. I feel like lifting him up. So the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the children of the east, they came against Gideon, if you please. And what God did was he reduced the army from 300,000. He reduced them to 30,000. Then he reduced them to 300. And the man ends up with less than 1% of his original number. And then God moves him with a trumpet. And yes, he moves him with an unconventional warfare. I've got news for you. When God is moving, he does not have to go conventionally. He can go unconventionally to make it work, because he doesn't need conventionally to make it work, because he doesn't need convention in order to bring victory. Give somebody a high five for the third time and tell them, God works in mysterious ways. What you think won't work, he'll use it to bring it about. And if you look over your life, you will find something out, that when God was moving on your behalf, it didn't make sense. But it doesn't have to make sense. It only has to be God. And God does not have to make sense. He just has to be believed. Give somebody a high five for the fourth time and say, neighbor, what's getting ready to happen in your life is not going to make sense, but it's going to be God, because he don't have to make sense. He just has to be God. Y'all excuse me, I'm preaching to myself, because I got to have the peace that allows God to work. Can I preach like I feel it? Have you ever gone to God because you didn't understand the process, and you said, Lord, let it be wet and let the fleece be dry? And when he did it, you reversed it. You said, let the fleece be wet and let the ground be dry, because where he was moving Gideon, he didn't understand how you can reduce the number and still have the victory. I feel like shouting. God has a way of making the opposition look so great that you can't believe that you can overcome, because what God is saying to you is, it's not you, it's me. Somebody in the house is going through something that looks like you can't overcome it, but God told me to tell you this morning, just relax and have peace, because I got this. I'm working this out. Just relax and give me some praise. That bill is not going to kill you. That breakup is not going to destroy you, because I am the God of peace. My peace I give to you, not as the world, but my peace. Give somebody a high five for the fifth time and say, neighbor, it's already worked out. It's already done. The healing is already there. The power is already delivered. Relax, relax, and let God work it out. I feel like shouting here. I feel like talking to somebody. Give somebody a high five for the second to the last time and say, neighbor, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. God's already got the victory your way. It's already done. It's already finished. Relax, lay back, and give me some praise for what I've already done. It's done in the spirit. It'll come to pass. It'll manifest itself. I feel like giving God some praise, for my healing is already done. I feel like lifting him up because my money is already in place. I feel like giving him the glory, for the deal is already sealed. I feel like telling the Lord thanks because the suit is already in my favor. I feel like lifting him up because the situation is already done. And when you believe God, he gives you peace. Peace. Give somebody a high five for the last time and say, neighbor, what you need is peace. I'm getting ready to close. Jehovah Shalom, the Lord is my peace, the peace of God that passeth all understanding. Shake somebody's hand for the next message and say, neighbor, I don't understand how I've been through so much and still have peace. I've learned how to relax in the worst situation because God has given me peace. Fuss if you want to, cuss if you want to, but it's not coming out of my mouth. The only thing coming out of my mouth is praise for God. Peace. Somebody holler peace. I'm closing. I'm closing. I'm not strapped today. I have no back braces on. There is nothing more wonderful than when you are at peace with yourself. When you get to the place where you don't have to prove anything to anybody. And when you don't allow people to disrupt who you are. Many times, some of our greatest problems stem around our egos. And we get in big trouble over, do you know who you're talking to? When you know who you are and know what you can do and what your abilities are, you're not influenced by the attitudes of others. And let me just put it this way. You cannot manipulate peace. Because when you have peace, there's no handle for the manipulator to move. See, when people manipulate, they're looking for your confusion. for what you don't understand about who you are. But when you know who you are, and that only comes from God, you have peace. The Lord's calling somebody. He's saying, come, my peace I give unto you.
The Lord says peace, there will be peace. There'll be peace. I'm not worried about it.
Come on, young man, young lady. In this world of war, peace.
There'll be
Every child of God, peace. For you who feel like hurting somebody, peace.
There'll be peace. I've got peace today. It doesn't matter what's going on. Whatever the Lord says, there's got to be peace.
Blessed are the
I'm
peacemakers.
so glad about it. Whatever
Come on.
the Lord says,
You need peace in your
there
home.
will be peace.
You need peace in your relationship.
Hallelujah.
You need peace with your partner. Peace in business. I just want peace. Just give me peace.